Now I'm going to go over what is the best hiring process for hiring a sales rep. And best is, defined by me in this condition to mean this. It's that you have a large pool of qualified applicants who you have a good process to go through that results in a great hire within your budget with someone who's going to enjoy the job for a long time and keep working at it for your benefit. So unless you have a rep that lives in your house, fell in your lap somehow, or moved from a competitor in a different state or something and gives you some reason to trust them, you're going to have a process. And I have a few things here for you to consider as you go through that process. The first is that you can't make a snap decision. There's a bunch of components that have to go into this that allow you to trust the process and work it, right? The first one is, let's make sure it's legal, right? And that starts with the job description, the way in which you filter people, who you choose to interview, what you say in the interview, the questions you ask, and obviously the people that you offer the jobs. Make sure you're compliant in all the little stuff and of course the big stuff. There's going to be nothing more dangerous to your business than an unlawful hiring claim by an applicant that wasn't even considered, especially if you had a great reason not to, but you didn't put it down there. The second part is, in addition to legal, you should be efficient. I can't tell you how many times I've agreed to interview somebody that I wasn't quite sure, but I wanted to keep an open mind and I'd agree to bring them in, and they were a no-show. In my case, in some cases, I'd have to drive 80 miles to get there. So I'd get there before work at 7 o'clock. I'm waiting for this person, no show. I kind of knew it was going to happen, but I had to take my chances. I didn't want to be too close-minded to the opportunity. So one thing to be efficient is consider double booking these folks. If you have a short interview, which I'm going to suggest in a second here, a short first interview, you can double book them and make it work. The other piece to being efficient is knowing exactly what you're going to cover at each phase. But efficiency, right next to legal, is probably one of your top two things. The last two are sort of emotional, subjective things. One is to be unemotional, and the other is to be uncompromising. It's difficult when you're hiring somebody to do something, especially that if you're an owner that sells yourself, it's kind of an emotional thing to figure out who you're going to hire. It's a reflection of you. It's a reflection of your company. I can't tell you how many folks that I know that have hired, kind of overhired, right? It's a blue-collar job. It's not the prettiest thing to sell. It's not the most glamorous. But they come up with this idea of this luxury car version of a salesperson that they want to represent them in the community. So when they didn't need a college graduate, they got a college graduate. When they didn't need a person with perfect attire, they wanted that. They wanted great presentation skills, even though all they ever did was meet behind a counter at a truck or something. So be cautious as to investing too much of your emotions into the process, and just get the right person for the job. As to uncompromising, I have a tremendous story that illustrates this. At one point, I had started the year with 4 of the people that I loathed the most, which was to be determined in my forecast. So I had 12 reps, 4 to be determined, and each one had a quota next to them. So you can imagine the pressure that could put somebody under to make a decision, to find somebody. And I hired this gentleman. I'm not going to tell you his name in case he buys the course, but this guy, he was a good person, good work ethic, decent track record, but he didn't wow me, but I needed somebody. And I can remember telling the owner even, I said, he's not a 10, but he's probably a 7. And with my blessing, we decided to hire this person. And he wasn't horrible. He was exactly what I thought. He was just sort of average. If you're a sports fan at all, you have a set roster. An NFL team can have 53 players. A basketball team, I think, has 12. Baseball, I think, 25. Some of the sports have even said you can have so many players and spend so much money. I would recommend that you think of it that way, that you have a sales force that is 1, 2, 3, however many people, and you have X amount of dollars to spend. You may be way better off going for the high potential person that comes in maybe a little bit lower but has a potential to explode. If you're going to expand your payroll, do it because you have 1 or 2 or 3 superstars, and you need to, and they're paying for themselves. But the minute you start to compromise, you end up with sort of a sacrifice to everything. You fill a spot, but you don't get that upside. It's just sort of a mid-range that you can sort of hope for. It's just not going to pan out for you in the long run. So in addition to not making a snap decision and having a firm process in mind, timing is another big thing. I'm going to give you this sort of golden rule as to timing. If you don't have the time to train the person, delay hiring the person. Do not just hope it's going to work out. If you're listening to this course, it gives me an idea that you at least have some time. Hopefully it's not too late and you've already made a decision and you're trying to fire somebody. But if it is, you're probably going to hire somebody again. The importance is having the time to train is critical. With that being the golden rule, I'm going to give you two exceptions. The one exception is if you're in a business that has a tremendous busy season, like let's say catering at the holidays, or it's retail in the Black Friday scenario, or summertime and the schedule's just out of control. And that feature of that business, that schedule, that craziness, if that alone may determine whether your sales rep survives or not, if they have a part in that craziness, maybe you bring them on in a different role, or you sort of subsidize their sales process and put them in ops for a little while to sort of feel the craziness. If that's a part of your business, you're going to want to take that into account. The second exception would be, and I've used this myself personally with great success, is if you have a sales rep who's primarily a new business developer, I mean like on the phone, hitting the pavement, cold calling maniac, and you're not sure that they're going to do it. And frankly, how can you be sure until you see it? We had a process at an employer where we brought them in. They came in as a lead generator, sort of a salesperson in training, but they were not trained on anything other than setting appointments, opening the door. And we had a little tick sheet. And as soon as they got to 20 appointments, they graduated and they became eligible to be trained as a salesperson. I think we probably batted around 350, maybe 3-4 people out of 10 would make it through to that process. So we knew what the sort of fork in the road was going to be, whether they could make the calls or not, and we made that part of the initial test. And it was known going in. They were paid as if they were a sales rep, sort of. There wasn't a big giant bonus. That wasn't why they were doing it. They were doing it to see if they could get through the grind of the whole deal. And a little sweetener was from, I think, 11 to 20 appointments, they got to go on them. So it sort of was like a beginning to their training, but they were just sort of observers. And it was fun to see the transference from, hi, this is Susie, to getting to meet the person that was on the other end of the phone. So those are two exceptions, but if you don't have time, don't start the process. The third part of this is to make it a team effort. And I know some of you may be the only person at the company. So how are you going to make a team effort out of a one-person team? Well, there's ways to do it. You can bring in a consultant. You can ask your spouse. You can ask a friend. Somebody to hold you accountable. Make it a team effort and divvy up the responsibilities, maybe get a little bit of back and forth going in an interview process. But there's ways to make it a team process that are going to allow you to receive this person differently. You're going to be able to see how they act as a list. If you're watching them interact with somebody else, you're going to get a better view. Some of us, especially me, I like to talk. So my interviews, I was technically interviewing somebody, yet I was doing 80% of the talking, which is a horrible mistake. All right? But I did it, and you'll do it too. Let me give you a recommendation for a process that you can implement as a team. So the first round of the interview is a very quick one. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? What are you doing now? What other jobs are you looking for? When are you available? Do you have any questions? Go through all that. Make it 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes so you can turn through them pretty quick. And what I'd suggest is that you give them some homework. Let them know that it's important that they're prepared and that you want them to research the industry and get back to you with any questions. But other than that, you'll be getting back to them for a second interview. The next phase of the interview process is a team. So it's you and whoever you can build to be a team, and you ask them questions. Really hit on the homework to see how much they prepared. You'll be surprised how many people don't even come back for the second one when they find out what you wanted them to do. I myself have actually made the homework. Give me a call in a day and tell me if you still want to be interviewed. There's something weird about an interview process where the people, they don't want to give up on you, but they're not interested, right? So all you have to do is say, I've given you a bunch of information. I like to actually scare people a little bit and tell them the job's going to be really hard, because it was really hard and I didn't want to sugarcoat it. And so once they absorb that, give me a call in 24 hours, let me know if you're interested, we'll schedule a second interview. Or you give them the homework, either one or both. So then they come back to the second one. And you say, what'd you find out? You're going to get a great insight into how much initiative they show, how creative they are. If you really want to be kind of tricky, leave it relatively vague. Don't really tell them what the homework is to see how much ingenuity they come up, how much they have. And they come back to you with some questions. That's going to be fantastic. Now, the third interview, if you go for a second and a third, the third should probably be with someone who does the job. They're going to have different questions. There's going to be a different bond. I can't tell you how many times somebody has come back to me, my rep that I asked to interview a new rep. They came back and said, Chris, they asked me the strangest questions. They're like, does he really know if we show up late? You know, that's a heck of a thing for me to know in the process. Do they really care? Does anyone keep track of this? You know, all sorts of, let's call it windows into their ethics that they're never going to tell me. But one-on-one to a sort of peer rep, they're going to sort of show their true colors. And that's perfectly legal, it's perfectly fair. And frankly, it's in their best interest. If that's who they weren't going to last very long anyways. You know, so let me close this little segment with a story that I went through as the applicant myself for a sales manager job, but this organization did the same thing for salespeople to the best of my knowledge. It's a nationwide waste management company that had oodles of experience, people all over the place. But this was the process they took me through, and I suggest you give it a thought if you like it. They placed the ad. The recruiter/HR person got a hold of me, asked some questions to kind of get me in the fold, found out my price point, that type of thing. Then they had an open house, so it was a by invitation open house. Come here. It was after work, like 5:30, 6 o'clock. There's some food, some drink. It's very casual. But they were very strategic. There was the general manager was over here, somebody else was over there, and the HR person kind of routed me around. So it was effectively an interview in a casual setting without a whole bunch of rigmarole, but so that they could see how I fit. So it was kind of a culture thing. I think they had beer, I'm not sure, but they might have. But they had snacks and soft drinks and whatnot. After dinner, they told you to be casual, the whole deal. So I passed that. And it was kind of funny. I'm interested in the process. Like, what are these guys putting me through? And so the last step, and I didn't get the job, by the way. The last step was this. They brought me in, and they invite me into this meeting room. There was a paid consultant that they flew in. This paid consultant ran the entire process while 6 other people from the local and regional offices observed me. My would-be boss, some of my would-be coworkers, my would-be boss's boss, and some other folks. They didn't say anything. And this consultant walked me through a process. They asked me some situational things. They said, what would you do in this scenario? What would you do in that scenario? Then they gave me homework on the spot, sent me to a different room. I think it was prepare it was all situational things for me as a sales manager, so it wouldn't apply as a salesperson, but for your sake, you know, you give them some industry jargon or whatever. How would you present our firm? Bring me back in, present again, everyone's watching. Send me back, give me another homework, bring me back, and then I leave. So this organization, they flew in, they paid a consultant, they flew in 3 other people, and they had 3 other people spend 2 hours watching me. That's how much they invested in just the interview process. So if you can afford to do even a little bit of that, it's going to pay off. I know it's tempting to just say, oh, I like that person, I like that person. They went to my college, we know each other from church. It's just not enough. You have to be objective. You have to take them through a process. You have to take your time and do it right. So I've gone over a bunch of stuff, what worked for me, what worked for other companies, what you should consider. But keep in mind, this is your business. You need to do it in a way that you can afford to do it, in a way that you're comfortable. But just know how important this process is. And that if you do it right and you write the steps down, you can even do a flow chart, you ask for help, you take your time, you're going to end up with a much better result over time. I can't promise you a great hire. I can promise you you'll make less bad hires. The great hires are going to come from your training and your industry as much as anything. But just eliminating bad hires would be a fantastic outcome. And I'll give you one last little piece of advice. Tell somebody what you're doing and ask them to hold you accountable for what you're up to. You know, if you're telling yourself, your outward self, your inward self, I don't want to make a mistake, I want to do this process, just grab a buddy and say, keep me honest with this. Before I make an offer, I want to run this candidate by you, and will you make sure that I'm not making a mistake? And tell them the criteria that you're going after, and have them make you prove out that they match. It's a critical hire for a small business like yours, and if you take your time and do it right, you won't be sorry.